All right, thanks for logging into our webinar today. Or if you're watching the recording of this video, thanks for opening the video. If you're not currently in the upper Midwest here, you might want to stop and appreciate that this is a webinar and you're only attending virtually, as it's currently about 20 degrees with a few inches of snow here in Minneapolis. Lovely day, lovely fall day. We're pleased to present this inaugural entry in what we plan to be a regularly recurring IPUMS webinar series. Today's topic is IPUMS NHGIS, the National Historical Geographic Information System, our website for providing free online access to U.S. geographic census data from 1790 to the present. My name is Jonathan Schrader. I'm a research assistant at IPUMS and a project manager on the NHGIS project. I'm joined today by Dave Van Riper, the director of the Spatial Analysis Core at our center and also co-manager of the NHGIS project.
Hi everyone, this is Dave. You'll be hearing my voice a few times today. I will be running the Q&A, and as you drop questions into the Q&A box, I will be reading them out loud to Jonathan at different times during the session.
Yes, thanks Dave. We will, as I noted earlier, be recording this webinar and making a video available probably sometime next week. We will announce when that is available by Twitter if you're following us at NHGIS. And we will also have a link on our NHGIS homepage. So today, oh boy, gotta be able to advance my slide. Here we go. The plan for today is to start with a very basic introduction to NHGIS and a basic walkthrough of our website. How do you find and download data from NHGIS? I will then continue with a bit of a presentation on how NHGIS differs from alternatives where you can also get the similar types of census data. And I will provide a few example highlights of the types of data that we have. That will take us, I think, through about half of our time. We have 1 hour scheduled. Through the second half, we will open it up to questions. Dave will be monitoring what's coming in. You can ask questions as I'm going through the first half. However, I will probably skip through those until we open it up at the end. And then, depending on how busy the question line is, I will also plan to guide you through some features of our website and some nuances of our data system as time allows. The primary goal here is to provide a basic introduction. So if you are an experienced user, you will probably not see a whole lot of new stuff here. I'm sure there'll be some things. And if you choose to opt out, that's fine. You could skip ahead to a later part of this video, or you could plan to check out some future webinars that we plan to offer that might be of greater interest. Otherwise, this webinar should be a good fit for you if you're new to NHGIS, whether you've never used it or you've just checked it out a few times, or if you're generally new to census summary data in general. By the end, you should have a good idea of the range of data resources NHGIS provides, and you should be comfortable navigating our website to find and download the data you're looking for. To get started, I want to point out that NHGIS is part of the larger IPUMS ecosystem of census and survey data websites. IPUMS is a website, IPUMS.org. IPUMS is also a research unit at the University of Minnesota, where around 100 of us are working on large-scale harmonization and dissemination of both U.S. and international data. Basically, we take census and survey data from different sources, different times, different countries, and we standardize how the data are coded, documented, and formatted, making it easier to compare and analyze information from all our various sources. We also make it easier to find and download the data through several specialized data access systems. If you go to our front page, you'll see there are 9 major categories of projects here, NHGIS being one of those. And What makes NHGIS unique is that we provide US geographic summary data and boundary data. The other projects, most of them provide census microdata, and some of them provide international data, some of them provide health, time use, other types of data. Definitely encourage you to check those out if you were not familiar with those. But NHGIS data looks something like this. Here we have 1840 and 1940 county level % Black information mapped. And in the circles, you can see census tract level data from 1940. NHGIS is a place where you can go to get both the table data that describes these census characteristics, counted characteristics, and the boundary data for these counties and census tracts as they were defined historically. We have state and county tables and boundaries going back to 1790, and we have the tract data back to 1910. Since 1970, we have all kinds of different summary file data for many, many different levels of geography beyond tract, county, and state. We have boundary files for every census unit since 1990, and for most units back to 1980. So we have a great variety of resources for mapping and analyzing historical census data and even current census data. A key thing about NHGIS that makes us different from the other IPUMS sites, as I was saying, is that most of the other sites provide microdata, and I imagine some of you are already familiar with some of those projects, and you might be wondering what NHGIS has to offer. A key way to think about the difference between our data is in the observation units of the data. When you obtain microdata, the records each describe a household or a person, and characteristics of that person or household based on their specific individual responses to the census. In contrast, the NHGIS data is geographic summary data for geographic areas. And this diagram shows you the range of types of areas that, that the census collects and summarizes data for. These go all the way back down to census blocks, and NHGIS also has information for that level. Why would you use one or the other? What are the key differences between these? Microdata is really, really flexible. It gives you great control over how you want to classify your data, how you want to model relationships, because you have all of the information about an individual and their household. So you can get any age category that you want. If you want to know about people aged 16 to 19, you don't have to worry about whether the census has produced a table for that. NHGIS data is only published summary tables, the things that the census has already tabulated. We will probably be producing some new tabulations on our own soon, but right now everything we have is something that the census had at some point chose to tabulate. That means that it might not include a unique cross-tabulation of race by educational attainment by age that you need for your analysis, and therefore you might need to go to microdata for that. However, a big constraint on microdata analysis is that the public microdata that the census makes available and is available on IPUMS is restricted greatly in its geographic detail. In recent censuses, the public microdata can only report geography down to the level of the PUMA, the public use microdata area, which has to have at least 100,000 people in it. So if you are interested in specific communities, specific neighborhoods, in general, you would not be able to use microdata to analyze those areas. There are also limited sample sizes in recent years, 1940 and earlier. We do have full count microdata. Everyone who is reported can be can be in our data set because it's beyond the 72-year limit on the census privacy. But for more recent censuses, it is a limited sample, whereas the geographic summary data describes the whole population. Census block data, for example, describes 100% of the population with some perturbation to protect privacy at the block level. But for larger levels, you can get highly accurate data for large areas, and that might be important for some kinds of analysis. So one last thing I want to say about NHGIS before we dig in is that NHGIS, despite the word GIS being in our moniker, is not an analysis tool as a typical GIS is. You cannot map our data on our website. You can't get reports of our data or do summaries of our data in our website. What we do is provide data. We provide data files. You can go through our website and download whatever you need and then use your preferred software packages, Excel or GIS or R or other statistical packages to analyze the data however you like. Having said that now, I would like to just go right ahead and jump in. What I want to do in the next part of our analysis is I'm going to click on that nhgis.org tab. Here we are on our front page, and what I'm going to do is do a quick walkthrough of the NHGIS data access system, so that before I talk more about any other details of our site, you will have a visualization of how the whole thing works and have an idea of how to use it. For the demonstration, let's say we're trying to recreate one of those maps that I just showed you. I will focus on getting data to produce maps of % Black population for 1940 census tracts. If you'd like to follow along, you should feel welcome to if you have a computer environment where it's easy to watch and continue through the browser at the same time. But otherwise, I expect it'll work fine if you just watch for now and explore on your own later. So looking at our front page here, IPUMS NHGIS, the key button here is right here in the middle. If you want to just go ahead and get data, you can click on that. You can click over here to select data. It gets you to the same place. I will come back to these later in the webinar to talk about some of the features, other features on our website, but right now I'm just going to go to our data finder. This is the part of our website where you can search and select different types of data and then download it. Initially, you don't see much here. It says no filters selected. That's why you don't see anything. We don't list all of our data until you've started selecting particular filters. So I'm going to click on the geographic levels filter. As I said, I'm looking for 1940 census tract data. So here is where I can indicate that I would like to find tables and boundaries for census tracts. Right here is the census tract by state, by county level. That's the standard census tract level, which I will click the plus sign by. It is now selected. I click submit, and now I get a listing of all of the NHGIS data that is available at the tract level. There are 3 data types. There are source tables. There are over 12,000 of those. There are time series tables, which I'll talk more about later. And there are GIS files. These are the mapping files that I can open in my GIS to map the data. Now that's a very large selection of data, so I can continue to add filters to narrow it down further. Clicking on years, I will click on 1940. And lastly, I'm interested in % Black, so I will also go into the topics filter and find down here the race topic and add that. You'll notice there's 2 plus signs here. One is called the breakdown filter, one is the table topic filter. We'll talk more about breakdowns later, But right now, the main type of topic you want to be concerned about is usually the table topic filter. So that's the one I'll add here. And note too that we do have help circles here. You can click on these to get more information if you were wondering about what those two things mean. I won't go into that detail just now. So I've selected the race topic, looking for data for 1940 tracts. I now see that there are several tables for 1940 tracts. This last one down here, sex by race, is, note that it is in a special data set that is just for Hawaii. For the rest of the country, I would like to get my data from these other data sets, from this other data set, the 1940 TPH major. If I click on this, it will tell me about the data sets in the 1940 census group, excuse me, in the data sets in the 1940 census data set group. It will describe where NHGIS got that data from and give you a sense of whether this is the type of data you're looking for. I can also click on the table name here to see exactly which categories are tabulated in the table. This says white and non-white. And right away, I'm in a somewhat ambiguous place, which happens as you're looking back in time and wondering what things mean. Does non-white mean black, or does it mean non-white? Well, if you've never used historical census data, you probably assume that it means non-white. However, in some years, in historical census data, non-white really does mean black, and most other races were counted as white. However, I have a clue about what it means as I look down the other population tables here. I see that there's also a table for the Negro population. And that's a clue that at this time, the black population was referred to as Negro population. If you have a question about that, you can go back to our main page and find source documentation for each of the data sets we have. You can also, a good strategy is to just download the data and see how it adds up. If you get both of these tables, you would find that the Negro population is a subcount of the non-white population, and therefore does not include all of the non-white. The non-white population includes races that are other than Negro population. So what I really need for the map that I want to produce is just the Negro population count. But because I want to produce percent black totals, I will also need a count of the total population. And you see that that is not available here. It's not available in this table. This total is only for the universe of this table, which is Negro persons. Because of that, I'm going to go back to the topics filter and select total population as another topic I'm interested in. I click submit. All of a sudden, all of the tables disappear because I have two topics selected with an AND operator. There are no tables that are under the subject of total population and race. So I can instead choose the OR operator, and now I'm getting tables that are either total population tables or race tables. And I can see here that there is a total population table for 1940 tracts, and add that to my data cart as well. So I think I kind of skirted over it, but I click these plus buttons, and that adds tables to my data cart up here. At any time, I can see which tables I have selected by clicking on this show selection buttons, this show selections button up here. And it shows now that I have two source tables selected. I could remove those from my selection if I choose, but I'll just leave those there for now. There's a lot more to talk about in these filters, in this interface, but hopefully there will be time to talk more about those things later. Instead, for now, I'm just going to continue to move through the process. The next thing I want to do is press on that green continue button. Now on this page, it's called the data options page. There may be additional changes you may want to make to your data specifications. You can review what you have selected. You can remove certain selections. You can, in some data sets, there are many different levels to choose from. You might add more levels here or remove them. Right now, the only geographic level available in this data set is census tracts. And there's only 1 year available as well. So there's simply aren't many options to choose from here. I'll continue. And on the review and submit page, this is where I choose options for my data format. I can choose comma delimited. That's a standard text file format, which you can import into most GIS software. You can add a special descriptive header row if you would like to view the data in Excel and see a description of the different fields that is easily understood. I'm going to turn that off because, as I say, the use case right now is a plan to bring the data into GIS. So the additional descriptive header row would not import properly into a GIS. Another option is to get fixed width files. And with this selection, if you choose that, we will also provide control files for Stata, SAS, and SPSS. So you can quickly use those control files to import the fixed width file into those statistical packages. We also have a separate IPUMS R package that I'll try to talk about a little bit more later in the webinar that would allow you to import these data. But for now, I'm just going to choose this default option of comma delimited. Down in this space, I can describe my request, because what NHGIS will do is save the request definition for you so that you can come back and get it again later or make a revision to it. So you can use this description for you to be able to come back and find your request again after you've made several requests. I'll just call this 1940 tract total population and Black population. Interestingly, I remembered that I also wanted to get a shapefile, which I can do at this point. But I will have to go back to the original options, which I can do here to click on the filter options. And I can now go over to the GIS files tab and also add a census tract shapefile. There are two to choose from. They both represent 1940 census tracts, but one uses a 2000 tiger line basis and the other uses a 2008 tiger line basis. You can click on these to find out more about what that means. The 2000 tiger line basis is the original NHGIS file. We used Census 2000 boundary data to create historical data. The census produced tiger line data to show street and water features in addition to all of the census boundaries. And we try to use the census boundaries as much as we can in defining historical boundaries so that if a 1940 boundary follows a particular street, it will align properly with the tract boundaries of later years that also follow that street. The catch is that the census continues producing new tiger line data every year, and between 2000 and 2008, they made they undertook a major accuracy improvement program to change the quality, improve the quality of their tiger line data, which means that the original NHGIS boundaries are not as precise and accurate as the newer tiger line data, and more importantly, they don't line up with current sources of census boundary data. The 2008 will generally align a lot better with current census tiger line data than the 2000. For this exercise, though, I'll just go ahead and select the 2000 tiger line data, and then I will go back through my steps. I can now see that I have both source tables and a GIS file selected, and continue here. Unfortunately, my description wasn't saved, but I have to change my description anyway because I now have two types of data, And I'll just make it a nice short 1940 tract data description. Okay, at this point, when I submit, ordinarily, if I'm already signed in, this system will take me to a page where I can download the data, but currently I have not yet registered. In order to use NHGIS, you will need to register. NHGIS and all IPUMS sites are totally free to use, but we do ask you to register. That process allows us to ensure that you've seen our terms of use. We request that you cite us. We request that you do not redistribute our data without permission. However, otherwise, you are free to use the data for almost any purpose. We will have your email address, but we do not abuse it. We use your email address just to notify you when your data request is ready for download, to send occasional news and updates about our websites. And occasionally, I have to admit, we find errors in our data, and we will let you know when we find errors in data that you have already requested. So this is my email address, and I hope I remember my email, my password correctly. Yes, I do. And now you can see the status of my latest request here is going in progress. The system is currently processing the request. As things become available, they will appear here. If you haven't used NHGIS in a long time, you might remember this was a little more cumbersome. We added this in progress status with the circle just last week now, 2 weeks ago, very recently. So we're happy to have that feature available. And now you can see that I've made 621 requests. This is my 621st. And here I can download either tables or GIS files in separate locations. I'll click on this first. This gives me a zip archive file. I'll open that. On most machines now, Windows and Macintosh, you should be able to open up the zip file directly through your operating system and find the data within it. There's a directory here that is numbered with my request number. When I open that, I find there is an Excel file. That's the actual CSV, comma-separated values text file. And there's also a code book. I'll open this one first to show you what that looks like. That opens in Excel, and I see a table of data. Each of these rows represents a census tract from 1940. It indicates which county the tract is in and what the population and black population are. Now, these codes here do not make a lot of sense. They are shortened so that they will fit within 10 characters, because if you've used shapefiles in a GIS, you may know that shapefiles have a 10-character limit on their field names. So we've ensured that all NHGIS fields are no more than 10 characters. But obviously that makes these things hard to interpret, and that's what this other file is for. In my zip archive, there's a code book. When I open that, I will be able to see down here exactly which tables I requested, and the NHGIS code is what appears in my data file. So one of them is BUB, the other is BBG, and that describes the fields. Down here, as I scroll down, here's a more specific listing of each field that's in the data file and what it means. And then farther down, citation information, exactly how you should cite us, what the use agreements are. And we also ask that if you do use the data in a publication, that you notify us of the publication. We like to keep track and use that information as we apply for more grants to keep our site going. Okay, so I have information about what information is in this table. I have the table. Next, I could also download the shapefile here in the web page. open that, and I have to go through a few double clicks to get down to the tracked shapefile. There are actually two shapefiles here. You might be aware that shapefiles are actually sets of files. There's a tracked shapefile and a tracked county shapefile. And the purpose of this tracked county shapefile is to provide you county boundaries that align with your tracked data. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my slides and show you, without opening up a GIS here on my desktop, a few slides to show what that data looked like if I bring it into a GIS. Oops. This is an example using ArcMap, Esri's standard mapping GIS software. They have a new product called ArcGIS Pro now. You may be a user of that. You may do most of your shapefile work in QGIS or R, which are free software packages, or you may not use shapefiles at all, and that's all fine. But here's an example of what it would look like if you're using ArcMap. These are the county and tract boundaries for 1940. And if I zoom in on Philadelphia and New York City here, you can see that the tract boundaries do not cover the entire US. 1990 is the first year for which the US produced tract level data for the entire US. Up until that point, since 1910, tracts were produced only for large cities or major metropolitan areas, and the coverage of cities generally grew throughout time. So here in 1940, you can see that New York City is covered, some parts of New Jersey are covered, Yonkers is covered, but most of Long Island is not covered, and so on. But that's what we have available, and there's lots of things we can do with that data. So I also have a table, and I'll just go through the basic steps here. One thing we do with NHGIS is try to make it very easy to join table data to the shapefiles. The shapefiles do not come with any table data in them. They don't have information about population. So if I want to map the % Black population, I have to somehow join the table data with the shapefile. And looking in the shapefiles attributes, I can see there is a field called GIS join. NHGIS produces in every shapefile and in every table data download a field called GIS join that allows you to join each record in your table data to each record in your shapefile. So that's the field that I will use. But first I have to add to GIS my CSV table data file. Once I've done that, in ArcMap, I can then do an attribute join from tract 1940 to the CSV file. Using here, I would specify that I want to join from the GIS field to the GIS join field in the attribute in the new table. I click on that. I do all kinds of fun symbolization work, and then I would have a map that looks like this, with tract level % Black information for New York City, for Trenton, and for Philadelphia. And you can see I've used a separate color for counties that don't have the % Black information at the tract level. Okay, that concludes my quick walkthrough of using NHGIS data. What I'm going to do next is briefly describe a few other alternatives that you have available to you for geographic census summary data. Well known to most of you, I expect, is the Census's American FactFinder website. The first key difference, why you might be interested in NHGIS instead, is that we have data for before 2000 and a FactFinder does not. So that's a pretty significant issue if you need any historical data. Some other features of FactFinder that are problematic or might dissuade you from using it. It's got a massive number of features, but you can't get the boundary data through American FactFinder. You would have to go to a different part of the census website. Not a big deal, but it's something that differs from an NHGIS. FactFinder does not make it easy to do nationwide or large regional analysis of small area data. Like I just showed you with the 1940 tract data, I was able to get the entire nation's worth of data in one request. With American FactFinder, you can only select tracts by state and block groups by county. You would have to go through the entire, if you want block groups for the entire nation, you would have to select block groups by each of those counties. And maybe most importantly, there is no block data whatsoever available through FactFinder. So if that's a level of information that you need, you might want to come to NHGIS for that. And that is one of our most popular data geographic levels on our website is our block data, I think because it's not easily available elsewhere. An odd thing too is that FactFinder will allow you to download table data, but only one table per file. So if I want to compare data from different tables, I would have to merge those files together. The census is currently working on a new interface for accessing data, but my sense of it currently is it's meant to be even a simpler and less well-featured interface. It's really, at this moment, a search tool. This is data.census.gov, and it is a good place to go if you just need a particular statistic. But if you are a data analyst and you would like to have a large table of data, in general, American FactFinder and NHGIS will, I believe, continue to be suitable destinations. Another website you may be familiar with is Social Explorer, a very well-designed website, I think, for mapping census data and also getting tables from census data. Social Explorer, like NHGIS, also has data from 1790 through the most recent ACS. They do support online mapping and table viewing, which is different from NHGIS. They have a lot of different types of data beyond what NHGIS has. They have US religion, health, crime data. They have some Canadian, UK, and European data. And several other types of census data that we do not have on NHGIS. A key difference, though, is that Social Explorer uses NHGIS boundary files in its online mapping, and as part of our agreement, they do not redistribute those boundary files. For the boundary files, you need to come to NHGIS. One of the unique things, too, on NHGIS is that we have data from the census summary files 2 and 4. It's somewhat niche, but what these summary files provide is fine-grained breakdowns of race ethnicity. So if you are interested in studying a particular racial or ethnic group, such as Cubans or Somali population, you could use these summary files to find lots of different tables for those specific groups. That's not available on Social Explorer. And here's where I think probably the most interesting and most important difference is NHGIS is a free website, and Social Explorer has a number of free features, but for its full version, it does require a license. And if you're fortunate, you are at an institution that is already paying for that license, and that's great. Social Explorer is really useful for lots of different things, but most of the things you might want to get from Social Explorer are also available from NHGIS. We have historical census tables and GIS files. We have a unique interface that differs from Social Explorer in that we allow you to filter and select data from all years, all geographic levels, and all data types, GIS files, time series, and source tables all at once. That means that if you are interested in seeing what's available from different years, you can choose filters and then be able to to search through our web interface pretty quickly to see which types of tables are available in different years. We currently provide a nationwide extent for all levels. With one exception, our census block boundary data is available only by state. One of the interesting things about this is that if you do want to do nationwide analysis, you can just get full nationwide data for it. It is a caveat, however, also in that currently, if you want data only for a particular county or a particular municipality, it is not possible currently on NHGIS to select data that only by county or state. All of our data files are nationwide data files, except for block group and block level data are available by state. And I'll hopefully have time to show you that later in the webinar. Historical vital statistics. We have vital statistics, is it 1915 to 2007, I believe. We have some historical agricultural data from the historical agricultural censuses. We have some county business patterns data and religious bodies data from earlier years. We have complete 1970 to 2010 summary file data. So that includes summary files 2 and 4. We have a unique product called time series tables, which I'll talk about more soon. And as I said, we are completely free. So in the next section of the webinar here, I'd like to just highlight some of the types of data that are really popular on NHGIS or unique to NHGIS. Here's an example of census block data within New Orleans between 2000 and 2010. You can see the significant population losses that occurred in the lower 9th Ward and in other areas of the city. Very popular uses of our data include Dustin Cable's racial dot map. You might have seen this in the news a few years ago. This is NHGIS data for blocks using dots to illustrate different racial groups. And here's the National Geographic recently did a similar mapping project using NHGIS block data. And here's an example using NHGIS block group level data by Kyle Walker at Texas Christian, an educational attainment in America map. A new product that we added recently is place points going back to 1900. We do not yet have table data for these points. We expect to add some in the future, but if you are interested in getting points for cities and towns as they existed in the past, we have data for that. And now I'll briefly describe our time series table. It's looking like I'm running low on time to get into all of the other details on our site, but this is one thing I'd like to highlight before we get into questions, and I'll take just a few more minutes here. So our time series tables are summary data linked across time with consistent codes and categories. Here's an example of poverty rates in Detroit for county subdivisions. I was able to, using NHGIS, you are able to download these poverty rates for county subdivisions in one file for all of these years. You don't have to go searching around for the specific tables from each of these years that provide poverty rates. In our system, the time series table data appears here between the source tables and boundary files. And we have two types of time series tables using different types of integration across time. One type is our nominally integrated data. This matches geographic units by name and code. It does not standardize the boundaries. So county subdivision boundaries change across time. That means that the data in these tables would be describing different areas across time. But we also have data that is standardized to 2010. This provides 1990, 2000, and 2010 data for 2010 census geography. So you can get, for example, 1990 and 2000 data for 2010 block groups. What that looks like in tables, this is a nominally integrated state level table. That works well. Nominal integration of state data. The state boundaries didn't change very much. The names stay the same. But when you look at tract data, you'll see nominally integrated tract data have a lot of empty cells here because these tracts did not exist in every year. So instead, you might prefer to get the geographically standardized tract data, which shows historical counts 1990 and 2000 for 2010 tracts. Each of these rows represents a 2010 census tract. We also show lower and upper bounds on each of our historical estimates because we generate these data by aggregating from historical census blocks. We take 1990 and 2000 census block data and aggregate it to the 2010 units. And if a block straddles multiple tracts, then we have a case where the population in 1990 might exist altogether in one tract or the other, and from that we determine the lower and upper bounds. Some examples of mapped geographically standardized data. Here's block groups, population density change between 1990 and 2010 in the upper Midwest. Here's change in Hispanic Latino population at the block group level in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Change in school age population. Here's an analysis at the urbanized area level, which we also have standardized data for. So you can see here areas that grew a great deal, areas that declined, and the size of the circles indicates the size of the urban area. Just summarizing, we have geographically standardized time series for 10 different geographic levels, for 109 different tables. That's 1,600 different time series. Currently, our geographically standardized data is available only for short-form census counts. These are the standard subjects that are covered in the short-form decennial census. And the reason why it's limited to those is that we derive all our data from census block data, and only short-form data is available at the block level. So we do not have geographically standardized data for income, education, or employment. For those subjects, we have nominally integrated time series. This covers 5,700 different time series in 271 tables, fewer geographic levels, years mainly in the 1970 to 2010 range, but with a couple of tables that go back to 1790 or 1820. Our next step in our plans over the next year is to add additional ACS years to our time series tables. Currently, we only include 2008 to 2012 ACS data. We will be adding additional 5-year periods to our time series in the future. Okay, it looks like I won't have time to delve too much into the details of our site, but we do have time to take some questions now. So I'll let Dave pick some out for us.
Yeah, so the first question that's come in is what are these 5-year data sets from the American Community Survey? Is it an average over 5 years, or how are those data created?
Okay, the American Community Survey is a census survey that happens continually throughout every year, and it is a small sample. So for a given year, they produce data only for areas that have at least 65,000 people in them. So the 2017 one-year ACS summary data recently came out. That is covering areas of 65,000 or more. For smaller areas, they need a larger sample than a one-year sample. So they combine 5 years of samples, and that allows them to produce a large enough sample that they can report statistics for small areas. And they come out with a new 5-year period every year. And we will be adding the 5-year from 2013 to 2017 in next month when it comes out.
The next question that's come in, why don't the standardized data all go back to 1790?
The standardized data. As I was saying, currently we are trying to produce the most high quality standardized data that we can. So we are using census block data as our source for everything. I think I have some. Here's an example of what 1990 blocks look like within 2010 census tracts. And given the red 1990 blocks here, we can determine the exact population of the exact 1990 population of the 2010 tracts. The problem is we do not currently have block data for earlier years. We don't have any block data for 1980 or earlier that is that has boundary data with it, and we don't have, we wouldn't be able to then create these really high quality statistics for 2010 units.
The next question that's come in, so you mentioned PUMA geographic areas.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between a PUMA and, say, a standard metropolitan statistical area?
A PUMA is, the only thing that's required of a PUMA is that it fits within a state. Quite often, PUMAs might match up with metropolitan areas, but it depends on the state agency that was charged with creating the PUMA boundaries. The census coordinates with state data centers throughout the country, and they are allowed to choose how PUMA boundaries are constructed. They often follow county boundaries. They often do follow metropolitan area boundaries, but not always.
The next question that's come in, do you know how or if your standardization procedure, i.e. aggregating up from block level data, differs from social explorers?
Yes, I do. Social Explorer is using LTDB, the Longitudinal Tract Database. And the differences across those different products, you might have also heard of the Geolytics Neighborhood Change Database, which is another product that provides geographically standardized data. The key difference between LTDB and Social Explorer, which are using the same model, and NHGIS, is that NHGIS uses a block source for all of our standardized data, which means that it's a lot higher quality because we can tell you in a lot of cases, like the example I showed you just a minute ago, exactly what the population was. Not just the population, but the Black population as well. And LTDB, in contrast, starts with a tract source. So in that example, they would start with these 1990 tracts instead of, this large 1990 tract. They would use the data from that instead of from these individual blocks. And they would disaggregate from this large tract, and they do it in the same proportion for every statistic that they're modeling. So if they estimate that 27% of the total population is in this tract, they also estimate that 27% of the Black population is in that tract. Or if they estimate 5% of the population is in that tract, they will also estimate that 5% of the Black population is in that, which means that every tract that is split, every 2010 tract that is split from the same source tract will have the same exact estimate in a percentage Black statistic. NHGIS, in contrast, in this example, can show that there is extreme segregation in this case because we have exact counts of the Black population within these areas. That's the main difference. We will plan to provide a webinar soon, sometime in the next several months, that is focused on our time series, and I will be able to provide more detail on our methods then.
That's the last question that's come in that I thought we should address. Why don't we go to the end of our slide deck and just talk about what's coming in the future?
Sure.
And start to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes.
Sure. Okay. So I wanted to highlight some of the things that we do not yet have on our site that we are planning to add. Within the next year, we're hoping to start adding annual tract population estimates from 1990 through 2020. Of course, not through 20. Our first set won't go through 2020, but what we'll be able to do with the standardized data that we have is interpolate across time within each year, also using county level population estimates from the census to modulate within each decade. We will continue expanding our time series data. As I said, we'll be adding more ACS years, but we will continue expanding our geographically standardized data as well. We do expect to develop models that will allow us to interpolate the long form data and ACS data with high quality estimates. Not quite as good as the block-based, but still very good. We will soon, we hope, start adding historical tables that we have generated ourselves from the full count microdata that's available in IPUMS USA. These will allow us to produce some cost tabulations that are not currently available from the public data, and for geographic levels that we don't currently have data for, like the place and county subdivision. Another thing that we have recently received funding for is creating block boundaries for 1980 and 1970. This will allow us to produce those really high precision maps, but also to standardize 1980 and 1970 data to 2010 boundaries the same way that we're doing 1990 and 2010. That's going to be a long process, and our funding didn't come up to the level that we had hoped, so we might not be able to produce it as soon or as completely as we hoped, but we will be working on that. Another product that we'll be presenting a webinar on next month is IPUMS GeoMarker. This is a brand new website. You can find it now through our website or through a web search. This allows you to upload address data or point data and have tracked information attached to it. So if you're working with a large survey and you'd like to get contextual information about the neighborhoods that people live in, you can use this to very quickly add some data to it. Another thing that is a IPUMS-wide initiative is application programming interfaces, APIs that will allow external users to access our data and metadata directly through command line interfaces, so that you'll be able to use your statistical package potentially to directly access IPUMS data. To conclude, I'd like to acknowledge our funders, the NIH and NSF, the Minnesota Population Center, our sister center here that we work with on a lot of different things and supports a lot of our work. And lastly, I'd like to provide these links. If you'd like to work through some training exercises that will step you through downloading our data, those are available on the IPUMS website. If you'd like to learn more about our R package, this is the website for that. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, here's our handle, and feel free to email us with any additional follow-up questions you have about this webinar or anything else. We monitor our user support very diligently and are happy to provide whatever help we can. I think that's about it.
Thanks, Jonathan. I noticed a question just came in about where can we find more information about using NHGIS with R. If you go to the IPUMS R CRAN site, there's a vignette that describes the NHGIS aspect of that. I recommend taking a look. And we've recorded this webinar. We're going to be putting it up on YouTube, hopefully in the next week. So if you missed something or want to rewatch it, you'll be able to do that. We have an MPC IPUMS site, and we'll have a link to the YouTube video on off of our main NHGIS website. Follow us on Twitter. We'll use that to announce more webinars and update you on the work that we're doing here.
Yes, and I wanted to add that in the training exercises link there is R versions of the training exercises that will step you through using R to upload our data. I think that's all. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll check us out in future webinars.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan.